Bonhoeffer, he says this: until you wrestle with God, that you'll never know the depth of his love, the power of his hand, or the grace of his heart. There will be times when we will not understand what God is doing. There will be times when we are confused about the method and the strategy that God is using to accomplish his will in our lives. There will be times, you all, that we will not understand, or we will always not immediately accept what God is doing in our lives. And people have the nerve to tell us to just accept what God allows. But if we were to keep it a real this morning, as we would say in our culture, if we were to keep it 100 this morning, there are times when we wonder, why out of everybody did I have to be handed this? Why out of every situation, every problem, God, you had to give it to me? God, could you have given it to somebody else? God, I got enough on my plate. Did you have to add dessert with it too? God, you could have made it happen like this. God, you could have let my life be like this. God, did you have to take them that young? God, did you have to take my best friend? God, did you have to let me lose my job? God, did you have to allow them to do that much to me? And have any of us this morning, if we be real with ourselves, reach that point? I know I have, where I say usually, God, I know you're saying your word that all things work together for the good of those who love God, but then it seems like you can't catch a break. In the African American vernacular, we would say if it's not one thing, then it's another. In the words of sharecropper and civil rights activist Fannie Lou Hamer, she says, I'm just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And beloved, there is a point where we will all reach, like dear Sister Hamer reach, where we become frustrated, angry, saddened, discouraged, anxious, depressed, and mad at God because we believe in ourselves that, God, you ain't have to do me like this. This morning, I want to introduce you to somebody, not Dietrich, not Fannie Lou Hamer, but Isaac, who has a son named Jacob. Jacob is the grandson of Abraham and Sarah. And this individual named Jacob became angry at his circumstances, angry at God because he believes that God could have done me better than this. And Jacob is so mad at God, y'all, that Jacob says that, God, I don't care who you are, but I believe you could have done me better than this. And so Jacob is real, and Jacob has a physical fight with God. Jacob struggles with God. And y'all, this is the first fight in all of humanity. And we find Jacob having a physical fight, a tumble, a rumble, a tussle. He is shooting the ones with God, trying to figure out, God, why you have to do me like this. It's not so much this morning that I want you to focus on the fight, but I want you to focus on what happens because of the fight. That's why I get to point one, we all have a limp. Point one, we all have a limp. To get the language right, I don't have a medical degree. Never went to medical school. Out of the degrees I have, I don't have any medical degree in orthopedics. But I come today to help us to realize that we all suffer from a limp. And if you don't have one, just keep on living. And let me help you. Your limp may not be like somebody else's limp. Your limp may not have the same magnitude as somebody else. Somebody may be limping more than you, but the fact of the matter is we all have a limp. We may not experience the same pain as another, but if we be true to ourselves, we all experience pain in some magnitude. Paul says that we all have a thorn in our flesh that so easily comes to torment us. And just because you may not be struggling with that thorn doesn't mean that you don't struggle. That means that your pain just may be different. No matter who you are, we all have the propensity to have a limp. Paul declares we've all sinned and we all have fallen short of the glory of God, meaning that nobody is exempt from struggle. No one is exempt from flaws. No one is exempt from insecurities. Nobody is exempt from mistakes. Even the preacher has downfalls. Even the preacher has mistakes. Even the preacher falls short, that we all are limping from something. As some preachers put it, we are all a X something. We are all a X this or X that. And to be honest, some of us still doing it. This morning we conclude we all have a limp. And no, I don't want you to walk out of church limping this morning. But I want you to understand that we are all physically and spiritually limping from something. Jacob has a limp in the text. But before we get to the limp, I want you to realize Jacob was a liar. He was jealous. He was a deceiver. He was a manipulator. And I don't know if you know somebody, but he was a narcissist. Jacob was on the who's who list of who you did not want to be when you grow up. But see, Jacob, y'all, he's in the lineage of Abraham and Sarah. And if you know anything, Abraham is the father of all nations. But Jacob, the grandson, is struggling. And that goes to show us that I don't care what family you're born into, how much money you do have, we all struggle. And whether your granddaddy was Abraham and your grandma was Sarah, your daddy was Isaac and your mama was Rebecca, we all struggle. And Jacob specialized in trickery. Before Cash App and the scamming and all that, Jacob was the first scammer in all of humanity. Jacob had scammed his brother out of his birthright. Jacob was prideful, he was arrogant, and he thought to himself, God, you made the earth in 7 days. You sat back in your recliner chair and thought it was all good. But when you got to my life, you sold me short. And Jacob spent the rest of his life, y'all, trying to convince everybody that God did him wrong. But I want to show y'all something. Despite all that Jacob had done and all the struggles that Jacob went through, even some that were even self-afflicted. I don't tell you all of Jacob's shortcomings to diminish who he is as a person. But I want to show you that God still had his hands on Jacob in spite of all of that. And we learn today that no matter what you do or what you will do, that there is nothing that can remove God's hand off your life. The scripture tells us that nothing can separate us from the love of God. And we learn today that God visits Jacob. Now, God could have just been done with Jacob, wiped his hands and said, I'm done with you for the last time. But God visits Jacob. And y'all, this ain't no visit beside a bedside. This ain't no nice visit. This ain't no pop-up. But Jacob is visited by God. And God immediately starts throwing Jacob around. And y'all, I love it because my grandma always say this, whenever you in bed and you can't seem to sleep or you can't tend to fall asleep, the scriptures tell us that that means you wrestling with something. And we always say that we're wrestling with this or we're wrestling with that. But in the text, Jacob is wrestling with God. Jacob can't sleep because he believes God's done him wrong. And God pulls up on him, y'all. And God says, look, you think I've done you wrong? Wait till I show you something right now. And in his wrestling match with God, y'all, Jacob ends up getting the upper hand. God ends up winning part of the battle. That's how much pride Jacob had, that he thought he could win. But there's a quote that says, don't ever try to box with God because your arms are too short. And God says, I cannot let myself go out with this. And so God, he does something. And y'all would know that there's a certain way you fight. Anybody had a history before? Well, let me talk to you. I went to Norcom. So nevertheless, check this. When you fight somebody, you're supposed to fight with your fist. And when you start using other stuff, that ain't a clean fight. Let me help you. Whenever you try to fight God, it will never be a clean fight. God will not let you leave without showing that you have been in a fight. And so God realizes that he's losing the fight and breaks the hip bone of Jacob. And y'all, I don't know if you know, but anybody had a hip injury before? But hip injuries hurt. And hip injuries leave you with a limp. Your gait, your gait, your walk changes, your posture changes. You got to go to the chiropractor now because your whole life is adjusted by a limp. God says, that's fine. You want to fight me, you want to struggle with me, that's fine. But I'm going to give you a remembrance that every time you get prideful, every time you get arrogant, I want you to remember that I broke your hip. And let me help y'all. I'll be cautious of people who aren't limping around you. I will be cautious of Christians that say they've been with God, but they ain't limping. We got this thing in football, Deacon, whenever we played and after the game, and everybody be waiting after the game, and we would realize the young ladies outside, y'all, can we be real this morning? They will realize if you got in the game or not, Corey, if by the way your uniform looked. And y'all, if the coach could take your uniform off and put it right back in the bag without having to wash it, we know you ain't getting the game. And so, y'all, I would be very cautious of somebody that says they walk with God, but their uniform is spotless. I would be cautious of somebody that says they know God, but yet their uniform ain't toggle. And y'all, let me help you. We know you got down and dirty when your uniform numbers was all jumbled up. Not only that, you had grass stains on your numbers. And we knew either two things. One, you stayed on the ground half the game, or another thing is that you fought hard. And y'all, Jacob, he leaves this battle with his jersey torn up. But not only that, he has now a permanent disability. And I want to help y'all see this, y'all. Because a lot of us in the faith, preachers come up here, pastors come up here and say that we won't ever go through nothing. But y'all, I want to help you. God allows for the disability to come to Jacob. I would even go to say, and I'm going to get in trouble for this, that God caused the disability to come to Jacob. And y'all, I struggle with that because I'm trying to figure out, God, in all of your sovereignty, couldn't you have just put his pride down a little bit? But God says no, because that means every time you get prideful, I will have to come visit you again and teach you again. And I don't know about y'all, if y'all got kids or got kids around you, you tell a kid one thing and they do something else. And then you go back and tell them again, and then they'll do it again. You go back and tell them again, they'll end up doing it again. And so, y'all, Jacob, his track record is not good. Time after time after time, he's been petty and arrogant and prideful. And God says, all right, this is the last time. I've given you chance after chance after chance to get it right. But this time, to make you listen, I'm going to make it so you can't depend on yourself anymore. And y'all, can I help you? A lot of us don't come to church just for a good time, but we come to church because we need church. Because God, look, I'm struggling with church. I can't imagine how it is outside of church. And so we all have a limp. That's the first point. Here's the second point. Your limp shall bring you closer to God. Jacob says, God, I will not let you go until you bless me. After Jacob is injured, it says they were fighting until daybreak. I don't know about y'all, but y'all, yesterday, during we had a little tailgate. Y'all all know, some of y'all know I'm part of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. And I don't know if you've seen videos or not, but we be hopping and doing all that stuff. Y'all have hopped 2 times and like to had a heat stroke, asthma attack, all of that in 2 seconds. I hopped and then sat down. They said, you all right? I said, no. Y'all, when you give a lot of force to something, you end up tired. And a lot of us think we have burnout, but the reality is we've been fighting with God. And your burnout might not be that you're tired. Your burnout might be that you've been fighting with God. And a lot of times we got to realize that sometimes our burnout, it's not so much they keep calling me to church and they keep making me do this and making me do that and making me do this. But sometimes your burnout is you've been telling God no so many times. And let me help you. When you tell God no, you'll never get away with it. Because God doesn't know going to catch up to you eventually. And God will sit you right down. And y'all, let me help you. Jacob says this, that God has been wrestling me till daybreak. Do y'all know what that means? That means that from the nighttime into the morning, God has been wrestling Jacob. Y'all, I can fight for about 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, we need to figure this out. But they are fighting for 12 hours. 12 hours they are fighting. And God says, let me go. And y'all, Jacob says something in the text that changes all of humanity. Jacob says, God, I'm not letting you go until you bless me. There's a famous motivator, Eric Thomas. He says, if you're in pain, you might as well get a reward from it. Jacob said, God, if I'm going to fight you this long, I got to get something out of this. And that's how I am, y'all. When them bills come and stuff just pack up and anxiety and everything else comes. God, while that's here, I'm going to make sure I get something else in the process. Right? Yeah. My grandma, she got this theology, y'all. Anytime I go around her house, she always say, well, while you here, can you do this or can you do that? And y'all, us sons know, can you do this? Can you do that? And then it end up turning into like 20 different things, right? Check this. Jacob says, God, while you're visiting my place, even if it's fighting with me, I'm not going to let you go until I get some out of this. And y'all, that blessed me because that tells us that every time we have a struggle, every time we have a fight, every time we have a tussle or a scuffle with life and the challenges that life brings, it means that there is a blessing on the other side of it. Y'all, my dear friend, she just graduated yesterday with her PhD. And she didn't get her gown in time for the ceremony. They had missed the whole service. She was about to miss the whole service. And she told me time after everything that was happening, this is happening, and this is happening, and this is happening. I text her and said this, Dr. Richardson, I'm not sure about you, but there is something on the other side of this. And I come today to tell you this, that yes, Jacob is fighting. Yes, Jacob is struggling. Yes, Jacob is in the middle of a tussle with the strongest person in all of humanity. But Jacob is about to get something out of this. And y'all know I got anxiety and I talk about it a lot. And there are often times where I just pray the anxiety away. God, just get rid of it. And God says, no, I'm not getting rid of that. Because if I got rid of that, you wouldn't be praying to me as much. If I got rid of that, you wouldn't be fasting as much. If I got rid of that, you'd probably be on vacation more than you come to church. But because you got it, that's what keeps you close to me. And so that's why I want to encourage you. When you're in pain, keep coming to church. When you're in pain, keep logging on. Stay connected to God. You got to get something out of the pain that you're in. There's no point of going through pain and not getting nothing out of it. There's no point of struggling and cussing and dealing with them and blocking them and not texting them and hanging the phone up and not getting nothing out of it. Y'all, and I'm tired of going through life and just letting people get off scot-free. But I want something out of this. God, I got to get something out of this. God, I'm tired of just leaving places with my hands just clean. And we got this theology that I'm just supposed to pack my bags up and just leave. But no, I'm getting something out of this. God, you going to let the devil visit my house, Sage? God, I'm going to get something out of this. You're going to let the devil come to my house and mess with my children and mess with my finances and everything. I'm going to get something out of this. Jacob is hurt, but he still wants to stay connected. And y'all, a lot of us in the faith, when God sends pain to us, pain happens. The first person we get mad at is who? God. And the first thing that we do, I've seen it, y'all, we stop coming to church. And then we get the blessing because we came to church, get the blessing, and guess what? We don't see people no more. And then we got the same cycle, and the same cycle again. But Jacob says, I need y'all to realize something. That even though I'm hurt, you still got to stay connected to God. Jacob says, even in your anger, you got to still stay connected. Even when you're limping, to still stay connected. The first point is we all have a limp. The second point is what? Help me. Yeah, your limp should bring you closer to God. And then here's my third point. Your limp is a reminder of God's grace. Church administrator, can you give me that, please? So I wanted to do something today, and Sister Jackie was minding my business and asked me why I got a walking stick. I told her just wait a little bit. So check this. I had a crutch at first. I said, well, they ain't had no crutches back then. They just had staffs and walking sticks. And y'all, if y'all look at verse 30 and 31 of the text, it says that he's broken the hip of Jacob. But not only that, it says Jacob is now forced to walk forever with this limp. And y'all, we miss it so much in the text because when we see a staff, who do we always relate the staff to? Moses. But we don't ever see Jacob with a staff. We always see Moses with a staff. Because Moses and his staff did what? He parted the Red Sea. Y'all some biblical scholars in here. Check this. He parted the Red Sea with his staff. But I think we miss the staff of Jacob. Why? Because his staff is his disability. But y'all, Jacob helps us because the staff, he names it Peniel, to mean a place where he struggled with God, but he won. And God spared his life, even though God won. Y'all, let me help you. This staff is a symbol of God's grace and his mercy. Whenever we get in problems and situations and we have our limp, it is a symbol of God's grace and his mercy towards each and every one of us. Anybody ever rode the school bus? My mama and them ain't let me ride the school bus to high school. Nevertheless, check this. To high school, y'all. Check this. Rode the school bus. And y'all know when there was somebody with crutches, we knew we won't get into breakfast on time. Because the bus had to stop. You had to wait. Somebody had to grab the book bag. And somebody had to go with them on. I mean, they hitting everybody down the aisle with the crutches. They got the nerve to sit all the way in the back of the bus. And they the most disabled in the whole bus. But y'all, I realized something. That most of the people with crutches in high school, they had to often change their entire day based off their crutch. But can you imagine having to change your entire life based off your crutch, based off of your disability? And I don't know about you all, but Jacob now has a limp. Jacob can no longer get on the back of a camel because he has a hip injury. And one thing you know about hip injuries, it is easy to dislocate your hip again when it's dislocated the first time. It never heals. And so, y'all, that's why I want to pay attention to today. God, how do we deal with things that never heal? God, how do we go through life dealing with things that I'll never get over? God, how can I deal with the grief that you said I'll never get over? God, I know you said that when I close the casket, that I can move on and I can just hold on to their memories. But God, it ain't that easy. God, how do I deal with problems and predicaments that I got to go home and see each day? God, how do I have to deal with the marriage that's a problem? How do I deal with the finances or the car that every time I get in it, it want to make a noise? God, you blessed me with the car, but when you blessed me with it, you ain't give me no gas to go in it. And so now the car sitting in the driveway, or I got to beg people for gas. God, I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul, And you want me to stay like this my entire life? And so what Jacob says in the text is that I'm going to name this place Peniel, because I want to be reminded every time I get arrogant. I want to be reminded every time I get prideful. Every time I think I done it on my own, Sister Renee. Every time I think that I got myself where I am, then I got to look down at my limp. And I got to be reminded, y'all. Y'all, Mr. Jerome, and he don't mind Mr. Jerome. Well, good friend of this church. Friend of my grandmother, he got a cane. And the other day, he had the cane laying on the ground. Y'all, I almost needed the cane after I tripped over it. I kicked that cane halfway across the house. Y'all, the cane get in the way sometimes. The crutch gets in the way sometimes. My anxiety gets in the way sometimes. The grief gets in the way sometimes. Y'all, there's sometimes you got to tell people, y'all, I'm sorry. I don't mean to treat you like this, but I'm just hurting. I don't mean to treat you like this, but my cane getting in the way today more than it's ever been before. I had to tell somebody the other day, I'm sorry, but I'm projecting on you right now. This ain't got nothing to do with you, and let me help y'all. On y'all defense, let me help you. There are some people in your life, it ain't nothing to do with you. They just haven't found out the right way to deal with their limp. And y'all, I always say that. There are no mean people in the world. It's nice people dealing with mean problems. No, look, nobody's mean. They just hurt. And they just hurting from something. And y'all, one thing I know for sure is growing up, my granddaddy had a cane. And when I was little, I used to take granddaddy's cane, and we thought the cane, y'all, come on. Y'all remember the cane was the coolest thing. You could get a little pimp walk with the cane, everything, right? And then my granddad had the cane where you could adjust the cane, right? The little holes on it. If you were tall or short or tall, y'all, as a kid, I used to love going to get that cane because it let me be like my granddaddy. And y'all, let me help y'all. We need that much joy when we see that cane down or that walk down, because it's a reminder that the more that I'm broken, the more God can do his work in me. The more I look down at what God broke in me, the more I realize that God, you know what? It ain't really me doing all of this. But God, it's your grace and your mercy. God, I didn't drive myself to church. God, I didn't put myself through school. God, I didn't give myself that job. I know you went on Indeed and applied, but let me help you. You ain't give yourself that job. And that's why you ought to go to work. Don't tell your manager this, but the manager ain't give you the job either. But God set it up in such a fashion. Because of his grace and his mercy, they call them God's twins. And so this old lady, y'all, and I'm done, this old lady, she was limping off the plane, y'all. And she was limping off the plane, and they asked her, did she need help? She said, no, I don't want to ride in that. Y'all know the little things that ride through the airport. If you ever want a hack, just go limping in the airport, and you can get one of them things and get to your flight a little quicker. But nevertheless, don't tell them Pastor told you that. But nevertheless, check this. The old lady's in the airport, and she's limping. And then she's limping. Everybody is stopping her, because they're trying to figure out, why is this lady limping so much? And she got bags and everything else. Why don't you want to get in the cart? The lady said, no, I'm not getting in the cart. And y'all, they followed her for about 20 minutes through the airport, trying to figure out and make sure she didn't fall. Y'all, you know the little escalator thing? She got on the escalator, almost stumbled getting on the escalator. You know how everybody walk past on the escalator. You stand to the left, stand to the right, you're going to get ran clean over. And so the lady's up there limping. She gets off, she's still limping. And they still following her, trying to figure out, why is this lady still limping when there is so much handicap accessible things in the airport? The airport is the most accessible place there is. But this lady is choosing to walk with her limp. And y'all, after a while, the lady got tired of the people following her, and she just stopped and said, what y'all following me for? They said, man, we want to just make sure you okay. And she turned around and said, baby, I done had this limp 30 years. And I've been walking with this limp more than you've been born. And so that's why I like the old mothers of the church. Because they may be limping, but they are 85. Mother Harlem, how old are you? She is 81 years old. And every time I see her or see my grandmother, I am reminded that God is a keeper. They may be limping, but God is still keeping them. And y'all, I'm only 31 years old, but if you are 81 years old, there is 50 years in between us. And that means that I have so much to look forward to. And that means that I can walk even with a limp. And let me help you. The old lady, she gets tired and she tells them, I've been walking with this limp 30 years. And then somebody overhears the conversation. And the other person hears a conversation where I've been walking with my limp 10 years. And I've been trying to figure out how to walk with this limp. I've been thinking about getting surgery, trying to fix it and everything else. And the 30-year-old lady looked back and said, baby, just look at what the limp has done to me. I've learned to adjust myself off of the limp. I can walk with it. I don't stumble. I don't fall. I just had to change a few things. And when I changed a few things, I realized that I could live with this. And y'all, if you don't remember anything today, remember this, that you can live with this. Whatever your this is, whatever your stick is, whatever your limp is, whatever your addiction is, whatever your problem is, whatever your anxiety is, whatever your depression is, there is more grace than there is problems. There is more grace than there is mess. And before I leave you, you know, last week I brought somebody and I got in trouble. I got a lot of DMs that told me you bringing women to church. And I said, did you look at the whole sermon? Because I didn't say I brought a woman to church, but I said I brought somebody with me. And her name was Grace. And grace is there. Grace will always be there. Grace is there through your addiction. Grace is there through your grief. Grace is there through your problem. Grace is there through your crutch, your limp, your sickness, your disease. Grace is still there. And can I help you? Mother Harleman is 81 years old and I am 31 years old. There is 50 years in between us, but check this, the same grace she got is the same grace I have. And the same grace, Mother Harleman, that I have is the same grace that you got. And although we may be ending our series, grace is still going to be in this church. Grace still going to be going home with us. Grace still going to be at work with us. Grace is still in the prison. Grace is still in the hospital. Grace is at the crack house. Grace is at the meth house. Grace is wherever you need grace to be. Amen. Amen.